right, Rich, it's great to have you here. Rich Shoemaker, the man, the myth, the legend, in the flesh. What was your Ninja Warrior name?
I was the Ninja Doctor Daddy, which was kind of cheesy, and then the Philly Physician. And that's the one I settled on.
Philly Physician. I like that one. It rolls off the tongue.
Yeah.
Where are you from, Rich?
So I grew up in Cheltenham, which is right outside the city. So the Wissahickon in this area were really some of the first areas that I began climbing in. I live in Philadelphia now, so I'm only about 15 minutes from where I grew up.
What was that drive from your house to the Wiss?
20 minutes.
How did you start climbing?
I started at a small outfitter called Base Camp. If you were climbing in the 90s, you would know it. If I think it closed down in the late 90s, and there's a guy, Ed, I can't remember his last name. It was just an outfitting store down on Chestnut Street in Philadelphia, and in the back of the store he had a rock wall built that was maybe 15 feet, and there were rocks with holes drilled in them mounted to the walls, and some Nicros holds, because they're just coming out with manufactured holds. So much of the wall was just drilled rocks stuck to the wall. And my brother took me down there one time, and he and his friend took me down there. They never went back, and I never stopped. I would try to get down there every weekend. So that's where I started, probably 1994. It was January 2nd, 1994. And that summer I bought a rope. Someone told me about Livezy Lane. So I bought a rope and I went out to Livezy Lane, where I really didn't know what I was doing. I bought a rope. I brought some webbing, a couple carabiners. I tied my webbing in like a bow knot through like one unlocking carabiner and threw my rope over the edge. Fortunately, there were some older guys there who took me under their wing and told me how to tie a water knot, how to actually build a proper anchor for top roping, and probably saved my life. I'll tell you about those guys later.
Wow, thank God those guys were there. That sounds very high risk.
I just thought, hey, tie a knot, throw your rope over, it'll hold.
So you went from that to being the author of the Wissahickon Bouldering Guidebook. Can you tell us how that project came to be?
Yeah, so it was actually a little over a year ago, I tore a ligament in my wrist and was out of climbing for about 7 months. I was told I wasn't even allowed to hang from a bar with my own weight for 7 months after the operation. So I wanted to figure out something to do with my time. And I've done a lot of developing in the Wissahickon Park. And somebody floated the idea of doing a guidebook. And I thought, what better time? I got nothing better to do. I can't climb. I can't train. Maybe I can put together some images. And initially, I was going to do a written guidebook. And the Gunks App approached Char Federer about putting together a Wissahickon guidebook because they know him from his Haycock guide. And he said, I'm not the guy to do it, but I'll tell you the name of a guy. So they got in touch with me through Char's reference. And so all of a sudden I had a publisher, and I thought, Char had nothing but good things to say about the Gunks App, which he's used for Haycock. So I went with them and we put it out, I think mid-December, and it's been up and running for about 4 months now. So it all happened because of an injury and Char's reference.
Nice. Good old Char. Yeah, the Gunks App is awesome. That's how I did my Powerlines guidebook too.
Yeah, nice. And there will be an update coming by the end of the month, because there's a new area and there's some new there are some projects that went down recently.
New area.
There's a new area. Unbelievable. Dave Bruce found it, and it's very hard to find, but we've cleaned it out. Now you can kind of see it. The access 3 minutes from your parking area.
Wow.
3-minute walk. So it's like very easy access by Kitchens Lane. And we've got about 8 problems established on the area so far.
Oh, sick.
Yeah.
Really sick. So
Yeah,
how
yeah.
long have you been climbing in the Wissahickon?
25 years, 26 years. In the summer of 1994. We didn't know we were bouldering. We just thought we were climbing and training, but we were basically bouldering a lot at Livezy Lane. And then when I came to Philadelphia for medical school, I started bouldering was a thing. That was in 2000, and I was living in Germantown, and I started running the trails a little bit, and I started seeing all these like outcroppings along Lincoln Drive, and then I started exploring Lincoln Drive. Through residency, I started exploring the park more. After overnights shifts as a resident, my wife says I was very grumpy. Uh, so she'd say, just leave the house and come back later this afternoon when you're not so grumpy. So I would spend the day, permission to like abandon the family and go into the park and explore. And I found a lot of other areas, began, tearing out the poison ivy that was, draping over the rocks, and got a lot of poison ivy doing it, and developed a lot of areas throughout the park.
Very heroic. Getting rid of the ivy that no one else would.
Yeah, man.
During bouldering timeouts from the wife. That's
yeah.
That's great.
We would work like 6 12-hour shifts in a row, finishing on overnights, and then you get like 2 days off. And if you slept after your overnight, you didn't reset the clock. So you'd want to sleep all that night, and then you had to, so I wouldn't go to sleep, and I'd be up for like 30 some hours. And obviously I would be very, kind of a grumpy person after working for 6 12-hour shifts, finishing on overnights, and then not sleeping all day. So my wife would kick me out.
Nice.
Can you describe your early climbing experiences at Livezy Lane? What was the scene like back then, and who were you climbing with?
It was great, yeah. So I was a high school student, like 18 years old, and I would try to get there every day after school, 2 to 3 days a week at least, try to get there. And as I said, when I first got there with a rope, I didn't know any knots. I didn't know how to build an anchor. And the crew that was there, and there's a whole list of them, there was, and a lot of them started climbing at Reach recently. There's Al Margulis. You'll see these guys, Dave Rosso. I think they volunteered at the last competition to be judges. There was 2 guys, the really strong guys, Jamie Shuttle, and we called him Pumpkin, Mark Wallace. They were like the guys who could climb like 13, and Mark could probably climb 14. There was Rob Goldberg. There was Andy and Ed, who would bring like coolers of beer and offer them to unsuspecting high school students while we were, which I turned them down. I didn't think climbing and beer went together, especially since we were soloing everything. And 2 young ladies, well, one was my gym teacher, Sue Kligerman, and then she brought a friend who made my heart go pitter-patter, Jackie Florig. She was 10 years older than me. I had a big crush, 19-year-old kid, high school guy. And we would climb down there every day. We started climbing at the Henry Avenue Bridge, which you can ask me about later. But they took me under their wing. I mean, I probably would have died. They took me under their wing and taught me things. They taught me how to train, how to boulder. And I forgot one of the most important. There was Mike Cohen, the infamous Mike Cohen, the physics professor who was at the time probably in his 60s, who would solo everything there and terrify everyone who was watching. So it was really fun. The older guys didn't think we were like young punks. Anybody new that came, they would take us under their wing, teach us stuff, and we would be down there they were training for the Gunks. Like they would go up to the Gunks every weekend. I was still too young. I didn't start at the Gunks till like probably 96. And it was Gunks training for them.
That sounds crazy that people were soloing there so often. Was that the norm?
Oh yeah, and I just thought I might never told my mom, but when you've got a 65-year-old that's like soloing everything there, and you're like an 18-year-old kid, you think that's the cool. Like you can't let him show you up, so you got to start soloing. It's highly featured. If you've climbed at Livezy, it's highly featured. So a lot of the climbs that are like harder, like there's a 512 there, but it's extremely contrived. I've never soloed the 12, but I've pretty much soloed everything else. You could always grab another hold if you got into trouble because it's so highly featured. And the 5.7 was only 3 feet away from the climb that you were, the
nice.
little stretch of climb that you were doing.
So who were the first to develop the Wiss? Who were the ones that were the most influential along the way?
So for me, the first to develop the Wiss is hard to say because people have been bouldering there for years. I'd say probably, as I understand it, Mike Cohen, and then there was Louis Lutz, who there's a plaque at Livezy Lane. If you climb up the standard, there's this plaque to Louis Lutz, who loved this rock. Mike and Louis were the Livezy guys. And I think it was Al Margulies, it was Jamie Shuttle, it was Pumpkin, who explored. You'll find bolts at random places in the park. There's one on Lincoln Drive. I think Al placed a bolt on. It's just one bolt to protect like what would now be considered a high balls boulder problem. And it's a one move wonder kind of a thing. So they've explored things. They have something down at Revolutionary Ridge where they bolted a few things. And I would just say, when I started finding areas, there are areas that I was pretty sure no one had climbed, but there were other areas that I was pretty sure nobody climbed. And then I'd kind of see chalk on a hole, very old chalk. And I think, well, I'm not the first person here. So I know those guys developed the park quite a bit. And then having said that, I know DR from PRG, Dave Rollins, and Colby were in the park. It was funny. We've talked about it. We were climbing in the park at the same time, but we never ran into each other there. Dave Rollins and Colby and some of these other guys that were developing the park, who were my age, high school, maybe a year or two older than I was. But they didn't come to Livezy all that often. And when I started, like Livezy was the place that I went. I didn't start exploring the park until the 2000s when I moved here for medical school. So there were the guys that kind of trained me up, the older guys, and then there were guys my age who I didn't know about but were exploring the park before I was, that we just never ran into each other because they didn't climb at Livezy all that